Alright, welcome back to OrcaBoats shop. My name's Rod. Where are we at? We're on episode 14 now. In episode 13, got the center bulkhead in, the double bulkhead wall where the boat gets cut in half eventually to become the two-part nesting PT11 rowboat. So I've done a few things, didn't really video it, it wasn't really, that exciting stuff. So I'll just show you with a camera here what I've basically done since last episode. So the bulkhead went in and it was a clean edge at first, and then all of the sides of the bulkheads got filleted with about a 1-inch radius fillet stick and cleaned all up with the chisel stick. Then the knees or gussets got installed here first on the floor. So there's two per side, and they basically are glued in first right up against the little extra reinforcing block here, and then the next day after cleanup, then they get filleted as well. So there's two on the aft side and there's two on the forward side, and then after leaning into the boat, then the two knees were attached to the both sides of these center bulkheads on the port side and the starboard side. Then, meanwhile, I was building the trunk box, which is 2 panels. So there's sort of a glass one side, wait, another coat, flip it over the next day, epoxy coat that side, and then create the box with the pieces provided. Then that was aligned, glued into place, and then on day 2 again, then the fillets go in around the center box, the center trunk box. So we're going to move on now to glassing all of the hull seams. So what I have done in off camera is I have taken some 80 grit sandpaper and I've sanded all of the seams so there's no shiny bits, and then we're going to move on to installing seam tape, fiberglass seam tape with peel ply. So here I'm just cutting some 4-ounce fiberglass from the end of the roll, about 1.5 inches wide. I'm going to need multiple pieces of these strips to cover all of the seams inside the boat. And to try and get a nice straight piece using these longitudinal strands, just pulling a bit of a strand out, making a mark. That way then I can clean up the edges of this awkward strip of fiberglass so that it lays in the boat nice and cleanly, and less sanding and clean up down the road. And now I'm just going to cut a bunch of strips of peel ply, a little wider than the actual fiberglass tape. And the simplest way to do that is to lay down a ruler or use the edge of your bench and use a very sharp little razor blade to just cut some strips. So with all the parts and pieces prepared, I've just mixed up a little epoxy. We're going to do a section at a time. So here I'm just laying some epoxy into the bow portion of the boat, brushing it on all the seams so that I can just stick down the strips of fiberglass and then press down the peel ply over top. I have pre-cut all my little strips to length and laid them out so that I can just simply fit them into the end of the boat without any overlap or trimming after the fiberglass gets wet. It's important to lay the fiberglass strips evenly over the seam, distributing the width on both sides. But once wet, you can kind of shift the glass a little bit as needed to center it over the chine. And with the pieces of fiberglass laid down in the boat, just adding a bit more epoxy to fully saturate each piece. There shouldn't be any white of the glass showing prior to putting the peel ply over top. And I'm just going to work my way up to the second seam on both sides, add the glass, add more epoxy, and then finish up with the top seam. This area of the boat's probably the most difficult because the sides are so vertical, and adding too much epoxy just means it's running down the side, so I just continually dabbing and brushing. But this area will also be covered by the forward seat assembly anyways, but still it's nice to try and do as clean a job as possible. And with all the glass fully saturated and enough epoxy on there, it's time to lay down the peel ply strips. Individually, again, I've pre-cut these to overlap, and then I'm pressing the peel ply down with my brush, making sure that the peel ply is fully saturated as well. There should be no white parts of the peel ply showing as well. So again, if I need, I'm just going to add a little more epoxy and dab and push the peel ply down. So with the glass and the peel ply nicely laid down, all fully saturated, then you just take some paper towel and dab and push everything down onto the boat, and the paper towel will absorb up any excess epoxy, preventing any runs going down the side. So all of the chines have got glass tape on them. We've got one coat of epoxy on there now with peel ply, and this is going to cure overnight, and tomorrow we'll begin to clean it up, peel back the peel ply, and do a little bit of touch-up sanding and filling as necessary. Okay, time to peel the peel ply. Voila! Just trying to get an edge there, and off it goes. Alright, so I have let the epoxy fully cure for a couple of days, as I like to usually do before doing any sanding, and now I'm just hitting all of the edges of the fiberglass tape with the orbital sander 120 grit, cleaning it all up. It's going to be nice and smooth before I add a few more coats of epoxy. While adding 2 more coats of epoxy to all of the chines inside the hull, I'm just going to take this opportunity as well to fiberglass and reinforce the knees at the center bulkhead. So I've just cut a piece of 6-ounce fiberglass for this area. It's overhanging outside the boat, and I'm just going to dab on some epoxy. Kind of avoiding the center area. I don't want any excess epoxy running down in between the 2 panels and gluing those together, but I can use a roller to just saturate the glass in that area and push the glass down on the top edge. The difficult area now is to get the glass to fold down the inside edges of the knees and actually fold under and onto the fillet that's underside. So you can see the cutting of a few pleats in the glass helps to allow it to fold down and under. So as you can see, I just keep dabbing a little more epoxy. There's a lot more epoxy on there that's necessary, but it's easy with the brush to just push the glass into the areas that you need and get it to bond and stick. Now I don't need to fully saturate that whole piece of glass. The excess overhang that's hanging down, it'll all just be cut away and sanded off later. And finally, we'll just use a small piece of roller, which kind of helps to pick up a little excess epoxy. The roller will absorb it up, but also is nice to push all of the glass down on the edges. But I'm not going to leave this alone. I'm going to come back every 15-20 minutes and just check on it, because glass that's folded around compounded corners tends to sort of lift on its own and cause little air bubbles to form behind. So here I'm back after 15 minutes and just again using the tip of the brush to push the glass into areas that are forming sort of little air bubbles. And as always, thank you very much for watching. If you want to stay tuned on all the upcoming videos, make sure you hit that subscribe button and click that bell so you'll be notified of all new videos that are uploaded to OrcaBoats.